Is it a GG for add-ons in the near future? Blizzard is planning a crackdown, and we're here to tell you everything we know so far. Meanwhile, the devs finally dropped some class tuning, which means we have an update to our tier list. And in case you missed it, corruptions are now available, which means it's time to get your hands on a brand new enchant. But which one? Finally, for all you Mists of Pandaria fans, the Classic Beta now has templates for level 90 characters, with PvP already underway on the beta. Today, we will be covering everything you might have missed, starting with an ugly secret. Did you know that Blizzard does not want you to win? Just think about it. Every season, they cap MMR, which deflates the entire ladder. And to make things worse, they still haven't fixed queue times for DPS, or rating gains for healers after 2 whole expansions. Blizzard wants your progress to be as slow as possible to milk your $15 subscription. But not us, because our business model literally depends on your success, thanks to our 400 rating gain guarantee. We've helped thousands of players this season turn frustrating losses into satisfying wins. We do this by teaching WoW the right way, from your perspective, through the most effective PvP guides on the entire internet, with over 1,000 videos to help you climb for as little as $9 a month. But now, let's get into this week's changes to melee DPS. Get ready to buy a lottery ticket because by some miracle, we have big changes to both DK specs, including a class-wide buff to Death Strike, coupled with some key damage increases for Frost and Unholy. You could argue that the Death Strike change is what truly matters here, as over the past few weeks, DKs have been eaten alive by warriors, but honestly, who hasn't? In any case, the only spec we're going to move up is Frost DK, as its damage buffs are more impactful. While its DPS is strong, Unholy will still be a spec designed to pad the numbers of other specs thanks to the ability to cleave off pets. With all that in mind, we still think Death Knights will lag behind other melee this season. Moving on, Survival Hunter got a bit of a bump, seeing damage buffs to both Explosive Shot and Fury of the Eagle. These aren't the high impact spells, but it's definitely helpful. We already had Survival on the A tier, and we don't think a 3% damage buff will change their relative rankings. Next up, we have a relatively obscure buff to Outlaw Rogue, who are getting a small stamina buff of all things. Sure, why not? Let's be honest, the last thing Outlaw needs is more survivability, and the main issue facing the spec right now is having enough impact damage to actually carry games. Outlaw will continue to be the worst Rogue spec in Solo Shuffle. Finally, on the melee side, both warrior specs are getting some PvE-focused buffs, with Fury getting the bigger end of the stick, seeing a huge increase to Thunderclap, which is a crucial part of the Mountain Thane hero spec. Since these are technically PvE-focused changes, we don't think they will have that big of an impact, but Mountain Thane will definitely pump in melee cleave mirrors. There were also some targeted changes to Arms, who is seeing a small reversion to their Execute buff a few weeks ago, combined with the damage buff to Rend, which could make bleed builds viable again. While Warriors won't be hitting those Giga Executes, keep in mind that Mortal Strike and Overpower can both hit quite hard, and if anything, Warriors might have even better sustained damage with the Rend buff. Anyway, while there are a lot of changes to melee this week, our tier list hasn't really changed by much. While DKs are getting buffed, they're definitely overshadowed by the high tiers. We think Fury is a bit of a wild card. Arms is probably the better spec, but Mountain Thane could wind up doing some insane damage this week. Now though, let's take a look at what Blizzard cooked up for range DPS. The first spec to see major changes is Balance Druid, who are seeing some weird changes this week, including a buff to Wrath damage with a big nerf to one of its multipliers. In case you missed it, there were some questionable one-shots this week, with Wrath hitting for over 6 million damage thanks to Blooming Infusion, which is getting dramatically chopped down with these changes. We should note that Resto Druid is seeing the same nerf, but it won't be affecting the relative power of either spec whatsoever. Mages are also seeing some changes this week, including a minor nerf to Frost, but more importantly, a massive set of buffs to Fire, which was arguably the worst range spec in the game so far this season. As a result, we will be moving Fire up 1 tier. In the past, we've been baited by Fire buffs, and we still think both Frost and Arcane will be better for most players. Up next is Shadow Priest, who is getting a few interesting buffs. Halo is getting its damage increased by 30%, but Void Weaver is also getting a damage buff, with Entropic Rift getting a 12% bump. Psychic Link is also getting changed again, and is quickly reaching the same number as Big Dam's alts. We know Sea-Doo bumps Shadow to the S tier, but we still think the melee meta is too punishing for any hard-casting wizard. Now, we don't want to brag too much, but we mentioned that one of the best possible changes to Warlock would be buffing Demon Skin, which is exactly what Blizzard did. Just don't ask us how much we paid for this to happen. Jokes aside, this is a pretty big quality of life change. Will it solve 100% of Warlock's survivability issues? Probably not, but it's a small step in the right direction. There were also some targeted buffs to Destro Warlock, who are getting a ton of damage buffs to their Diabolist hero talents, which we should note is the less popular hero spec at the moment. Once again, we know this tier list might look a bit strange. Right now, every caster is good, but the melee meta is currently gating Warlocks and Shadow Priests. To be good in Season 2, you need some way to deal with the Bruiser melee like Warriors and Windwalker Monks. Finally, let's look at all the changes to the healer meta. First up, we have some buffs to Preservation of Ochre, including a 30% increase to Living Flame and a 20% buff to Spirit Bloom, which will definitely help as healing has been a bit stressful so far this season. As we've mentioned, the offensive healers really need solid throughput in order to work, and with these healing buffs, we think Prez will be in a better position to carry games with its offensive kit. Meanwhile, Holy Paladin is seeing some Lightsmith-specific buffs to both Blessing of the Forge and Hammer and Anvil healing. Even outside of these changes, we agree with Sea-Doo and think Holy Paladin is one of the best healers in Solo Shuffle, which is why we're going to move it up. With Brawler, Melee, and Mages continuing to dominate, Holy Paladin is passively strong in most lobbies. Next up, we have some minor buffs to Disciplined Priest, including a 10% buff to Power Word Radiance and a 35% buff to Ultimate Penitence. While these help, we don't expect the balance to Disc to dramatically change. In fact, after buffs to other specs, Disc might technically be the weakest healer in the meta, which isn't saying much since it's still high tier. Finally, make sure to be nice to Sea-Doo this week since Restoration Shaman is getting some major buffs right after the AWC Finals, targeting major sources of healing, especially for the Totemic Hero spec. As a result, we will be moving Resto Shaman up to the A tier. Again, having more healing output opens up more opportunities to play offensively, which is generally how Shaman thrives. Overall, the healing meta is looking pretty balanced. We're making the additional change of moving monks up to the S tier. Right now, Fistweaver is absolutely crushing it on the EU ladder. The ability to support your melee with an extra damage modifier while also hitting 3 million rushing wind kicks are yet another reason why some casters are struggling this season. In some more breaking news, we finally have some hints at some add-ons possibly being disabled in the future. Blizzard has confirmed that sometime in the future, add-ons will no longer have access to certain information. They've hinted that this includes information about cooldowns, both for enemy targets and friendly teammates. This could include interrupts, CC, offensives, and defensives. Without a doubt, this will dramatically change the way PvP is played, and might possibly influence the way classes are designed. But we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the current state of add-ons? Do you think this will be a positive impact on the game? And while you're doing that, we have an update on corruptions. They just kinda suck. For better or worse, corruptions seem to have an extremely minimal impact on damage and healing, with Void Ritual even being nerfed by 75% in PvP. Would be really nice to have some PvP tooltips, right? Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to complete the simple intro quest to be able to queue up for Horrific Visions. Once you do this on your main, you'll instantly be able to buy corruptions using the Warband transfer. Finally, all you Classic fans should know that the MoP Beta is live, and now you can create a level 90 character right now and participate in a special arena season until the expansion launches, which, if we had to guess, will happen sometime in late July, if we're using Cataclysm as a comparison. If you're interested in participating, be sure to opt into the beta, since Blizzard seems to be handing out access like hotcakes. And as a reminder, a skill cap subscription includes access to all of our games, including Retail, Classic, Mythic Plus, League of Legends, and Valorant, if that's your thing. We teach damage and healing from the ground up, focusing first on damage goals, and then teaching you how and when to sequence each ability, before giving you the most lethal burst sequences. These are just a small part of an entire course which teaches every spec from the ground up, and if you want to try something new, we've even leveled up our add-on, which now shows Bislists directly in-game as a part of the #1 PvP UI. And to help you stay ahead this season, you can now import talent strings automatically without needing to tab out. Skill Capped is the only place that promises you will actually reach your potential thanks to our rating gain guarantee. Be sure to click the special link below to get started. For now, we want to thank you all for watching. See you soon.